This video isn't going to be about a specific thing, more things I learned while going to retail spaces to find out more information for the next few videos. Retail wasn't doing that well before COVID, and because of COVID, it's starting to really shape the way things are working and making a lot of companies that are on the edge falter. I went in to find out how the geek stores were doing. Bookstores like Barnes & Noble have repositioned all of their bookcases so they have a sort of circular or box area that covers the areas that people would be interested in, like young adult to whatever it is back there, historical fiction. This is so that people can kind of group in with who they want to read about. This isn't too different from the way conventions are set up, or even some arcades. I also found out there's a new makerspace type magazine called Hackspace, and it was actually a lot of fun to read. When I got to the Valley Mall in Spokane, I found that all of the children's areas had been closed down. Either they put things in the way, or they permanently removed them. It was kind of disappointing because I wanted to get some pictures of those places. They actually had signs that said how many people were allowed in, and then little signs that said, you need to be like this to be allowed in. There was a lot of control and kind of worry about how they were going to be safe and yet still let people in and buy stuff. It didn't matter where you went, you would see these signs and know that they were trying to at least appear to be following all the rules to the best of their abilities. One of the more difficult things to deal with was that a lot of the places said, do not touch unless you intend to buy, which meant a lot of the things I wanted to know the price to, I couldn't check, which meant I had to take a picture of it and then check it on Amazon, which kind of defeats the entire point of retail if you ever think about it. At the Northtown Mall, I did find the drop-in and play area was still there, but it was closed until further notice. I got a few quick pics, but honestly, it was empty. I also saw a lot of empty stores, which has been a problem for the Northtown Mall for a while. It's been a question on what's going to happen next, which is why it was really interesting when I went to the comic shop. It turns out they were some of the first people to open up and let people come in. At one point, it was just them and one other business in the entire mall that was open, and they were making money. They had to close down a lot of stuff, which meant a lot of areas to play and gather just couldn't be done. However, it turns out this comic shop was one of the only comic shops, or actually shops entirely, that was making money in the mall. They were making more than any other store. I was told one of the only reasons why the mall is still around is the comic shop was making that much money. Even tourists would come in, look for stuff, and find some absolute bargains or some really cool geek items that they wanted to take home. With even the major retails shutting down, they're now having to figure out what to do with the mall and making money. The first option is to turn everything into offices. You would see stores right next to Burley and Burley Accountancy. There was also a second option, to let an arcade in. The negotiations were around 8 months ago, and it doesn't sound like much happened, especially with the COVID. But I'm really hoping it's going to happen because it would be a round one of my all-time favorite chain arcades. It has a bunch of Japanese and American arcade games that you can't find in many other places, from the table toss game to the latest Initial D. And of course, my all-time favorite modern arcade game, Gunslinger Stratos. There was another comic book shop. In fact, it's owned by the same owner as the one in the mall, and I decided to drop by just to see how they're doing. Well, I found out they were moving. They were actively emptying out everything as I was talking to them. Even greater, they were actually moving to a much larger facility, which would allow them to have even more comics than they had beforehand. I don't want you to think that all geek things were doing well. The VR stores have either closed down or are not open until COVID is over, which has shown a real financial struggle for the people at the VR. It's made me really wonder how video games are going to be treated in the future. However, I did walk away with one really cool thing. comics from pre-comic book day. I thought they didn't go out, but I got them instead. That's great. It was like manna from heaven for me. There's some other stuff I did and studied, but that's going to come up in different videos. Until then, it looks like Geek Stuff is actually not only helping with retail, but probably the only thing that might survive. I'll have to do more study on that, though.